campaigning for a second referendum. We have our own Kent Union campaigning for a second referendum. And we just feel that this is not necessarily an endorsement of what you're going to hear today, but really an opportunity to be confronted with a view that we are statistically in this room unlikely to agree with. But so it really is a good opportunity for us to be challenged in this, and for us to be able to be open and listen to what is one of the flag bearers of the Brexit movement in this country. And so I thank you all for being here, for being open-minded, hopefully. And if you have any questions at the end, there will be a Q&A session. But let's give another round of applause for Jacob.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honour to be here. And I will let you into the secret as to why I am here. It's because my mother-in-law lives about a quarter of an hour away, and it is my fifth son's third birthday. So you have given me an excuse not to be working away, but instead to have managed to get to my son's third birthday party. So thank you very much for your perspicacity in inviting me on this auspicious day. And it's an honour to be here because, ladies and gentlemen, you are the people who are going to be determining the future of this nation. After I have long since retired, you are the intellectual elite of the United Kingdom. You will be the decision makers. You are this nation's future. And that really big decision that the nation has made about Brexit is something that will have an effect on how the country is governed for generations. It is of fundamental importance and, of course, controversy. As it should be, because it is an important decision. It would be a sorry state of affairs if things like this could be done without any argument, any row, any discussion, if it just happened and was forced upon us and nobody cared. And one of the interesting things about Brexit is that although it has been very divisive, and that is true, it has made people interested in politics and engaged with politics in a way that hasn't been true for quite a long time. And that matters because democracy only works if people are willing to be involved in it, are willing to give time to it, and indeed want to turn out to vote to give legitimacy to it. There comes a point when turnouts become so low that the results cease to be of fundamental democratic importance. So the engagement that Brexit has led to is a positive side of it. But what I should like to do is to go back to the basic argument for Brexit. Why did people want to vote to leave the European Union? What was the case for it? And then to consider where we are now, and to end with what I think the opportunities are of implementing the decision. So let's start. Why did people vote to leave? Was it about £350 million on the side of the bus? Was it about immigration? Was it about agricultural subsidies? No, it wasn't about any of these. These were merely used to highlight the fundamental issue, which was that the European Union is not subject to democratic control, and that how you vote cannot change how the country is governed in areas that are the EU's competence. Now that caveat is very important because in areas that are not the EU competence, it is still domestic government that counts, but increasingly competences were flowing to the EU and had flown since we joined in 1973, to the extent that the powers of the nation states were still greater than those of a state in the United States, but were heading in that direction with the fundamental authority lying with the European Union, and of course, crucially, with the European Courts of Justice. Why is this so important? Well, in any system, the senior body that determines your law is where power is ultimately determined. So in any issue that was said to be nation-state competence, if the EU centrally trespassed on that, the decision would not be made by domestic courts to say that you have trespassed, it would be taken by the European Court of Justice, or the Court of Justice of the European Union, to say this has been trespassed upon and shouldn't have happened. But that always meant that it wasn't up to you to decide what you had agreed to, It was up to a superior body to decide what you had agreed. And that's a very different concept. That it's not like an ordinary negotiation where there's an independent arbiter as to what the decision is. If you have a contract, it's decided independently what the contract actually means. In this contract, one side of the contract determined how the contract was interpreted. So that was one of the reasons why powers continually flowed to the European Union, because not surprisingly, the Court of Justice tended to rule that power was vested in the authority of the European Union rather than with the member states. And our courts merely gave an opinion. They couldn't decide authoritatively. So that's one of the issues with the way power was going. But the issue of democratic control is important as well. I don't know how many of you know who your OMP is. You may be, there's great geniuses. I expect you are at university. Great geniuses who could list every single one of them and the share of the vote that they got, and you can explain to me how the D'Hondt system works. I can give a lecture on how the D'Hondt system works, but I think the ball would empty pretty quickly as soon as I started. You know, it is stunningly complicated and boring. And devised in the Low Countries to try and deal with political impasses there, which you will know all about. But your Euro MPs do not have the basic rights of a Member of Parliament. What do I mean by that? Well, what do members of Parliament do? What is the job of a Member of Parliament? It's not to be in the House of Commons between set hours. It's not to be in your constituency on set days of the week. It is to seek redress of grievance and hold the government to account. And how do you do that? It's all very well in theory. How do you hold governments to account and seek redress of grievance? It's very interesting. If you look at how our Parliament grew up, the method of seeking redress of grievance was to get a petition, and then that petition became legislation. But in the European Parliament, the ability to initiate legislation lies solely with the European Commission. MEPs cannot initiate legislation, and therefore they cannot go and get redress of grievance because they don't have that final authority that you need when seeking redress of grievance, which is, of course, to change the law. So that element, which is the main and democratic element of the European Union, doesn't actually function in a way a democracy should. So the only people who can institute new laws are the Commission, and they are appointed, not elected. That is a major flaw in democratic accountability. But equally, they are not accountable. They're not accountable to an electorate, and they are not accountable, except in the broadest terms, to the Parliament. The Parliament can chuck them all out, but you cannot hold them individually to account. There is no equivalent of Prime Minister's question time to hold the Commission to account. And the only time when a Commission was removed, it was put back into office 24 hours later. So it was a symbolic expression of discontent rather than a real exercise of democratic power. So the unelected body has the fundamental authority to determine the rules, and that means that you cannot get your constituents redress of grievance for an issue that is a European competence. So let me give you an example. And the example in and of itself is relatively small scale. It's a particular issue, as so many of the issues MPs deal with are. When people come to you in a constituency surgery, they are not dealing with the great matters of state. They are dealing with things that affect their lives and damage their lives that you as the MP are trying to put right. And in the Westminster context, most of the time when you go to ministers, if a mistake has been made, it will be put right. Why? Because you have that direct accountability. So let me give you this example of a constituent who came to me with an issue that related to European competence, an agricultural issue, and it related to a cow that had died. Now this cow had had the bad manners to die between Christmas and the New Year. If you're a cow, please don't die between Christmas and the New Year. It causes all sorts of problems. And the problem this caused was that the rules required the paperwork to be returned, notifying that other than being a lead man, there's nothing wrong with it. That was a cheap shot, wasn't it? And I wrote to him and I said, look, this is what had happened and this is very unfair. And as sometimes happens, and it's very nice to see Julian Brazier here, because he will know, former MP for this constituency, a man of great distinction, he will know how this worked, that very often, he was a minister, I'm sure never did this himself, but occasionally you would get letters back from ministers that were just waffle. No use to them at all. They were there so that you could form your constituent off and show that you got a letter from the minister. Well, I didn't think this was good enough, so I wrote back saying this isn't good enough, words to that effect. This is very unfair on my constituent, it's wrong, he's been fined for something that wasn't his fault. And then I got the truth, I got a letter back saying, your constituent has been treated unfairly, I don't pretend otherwise. But if we, the British government, were to remit the fine, we ourselves would be fined by the European Union. The Commission would take action against us. Well, that means that the ancient responsibility of members of Parliament, which goes back to 1265, and seeking redress of grievance, is not possible. It's denied, and individuals, ladies and gentlemen, individuals that could be you, have their democratic rights denied them when it is a European competence, and those competencies have been extended. So that if there is something that goes wrong, if it's the British government, it's the local council, you have a really straightforward mechanism that usually works of getting it put right, but that if it's an EU competence, you have no ability to do that at all. It just stops. That's undemocratic, it's a bad form of government, it's wrong. And that, to my mind, was one of the reasons for voting against the European Union, voting to leave. But it's also positive. It's not just the wrongness of denying democracy, it's the rightness of democracy. What do I mean by that? Why have countries come to the conclusion that the best form of government is democratic government? Why is it that people haven't decided that actually the benevolent dictator is a better form of government? Well, communism is a better form of government. Why aren't we crying out to be governed like the Chinese, who have a communist government that's helping them to get rich in double quick time? Because we know from historic experience that democracy leads to the best government. If you look, and I expect you do as students of history, those of you who are, if you look at the debates about how we are governed in the 17th and 18th century, they're not looking at democracy as an end in itself. They're looking at democracy because it leads to the best form of government. And if you see how democracy in this country developed in the 19th century, it develops because people are saying, if we give more people the vote, we will be better governed. They are definitely not saying, in 1832, let's give more democracy because that is the right thing to do, because democracy in itself is a good thing. They are saying it is a means to an end or an end in itself. In the end, it's both, because actually I think the creation of a fair and just society, the equality of all people under the law, is best expressed by democracy, even if that weren't economically successful. But it is also economically successful. Why? How does democracy help countries prosper? Well, it's one of the four cornerstones of a successful, long-term constitutional structure. What else do you need? You need free speech, you need rule of law, and you need the rights of property. But it is democracy that underpins all of those. How and why? Well, if you don't have democracy, it is very hard to maintain the rule of law, because it's very easy to corrupt the rule of law by bribery, which doesn't get revealed to the electorate, because there's no electorate for it to be revealed to. You just have a ruling class that takes it on. But that also needs free speech so that you can expose it. But you need rights of property to maintain the stability that allows people to have confidence that the rule of law will actually benefit them, rather than find that it is essentially arbitrary. So democracy is one of the four underpinnings of all those societies that historically have been the most successful. And it is an essential part of it. So one of the reasons for wanting to have our democracy back, to take back control, was because of the historic experience that that leads to the best form of government and is a moral good. We won't move, but there are people who may. And I no more can tell you who is going to change party between now and Easter than I can tell you the date of the next general election. Those things are unknowable until they happen. the next election is scheduled for a particular date, but that doesn't mean it will happen then. So there's a lot of fluidity in politics. There are a lot of people arguing for different things. There is no majority for anything in the House of Commons. That's a really interesting thing to bear in mind. So, there may be a majority for delaying exit, but what does that mean if there isn't a majority for any agreement that may then come back? What on earth you delay for? You delay so we have another chat with that nice Mr. Juncker. Well, that's great, isn't it? Lucky Mrs. May. She really does live, doesn't she? So, delay doesn't really help you because it's got no obvious end point. There is no majority in the House of Commons for a second referendum. And it may be worth dwelling on that because I have no fear of a second referendum. I think that it would be won overwhelmingly by leave. Why do I think that? Because there are many, many people who would not vote on the issue of the European Union, they vote on the issue of democracy. We've told you once, and we're not going to have to do it again. Just because a few people in Parliament don't like what we did first time, we're going to tell you again. And there are so many people, including MPs, who voted Remain, who say that they would vote to leave in a second referendum because they just think it's undemocratic not to implement the first vote. So I think it would be won by leave, but it would be unbelievably divisive. The division that we have had so far would be as nothing to telling 17.4 million people that they were stupid and they got it wrong, which is the basic argument of those backing a second referendum, and it's basically an argument of those who lost. I don't know anybody of any profile who is backing a second referendum who was in favour of leaving in the first place. So it is therefore the project of the losers who want to reverse what happened, and that's not a good basis for arguing for it. But it also would be completely undecisive. Say I'm wrong. I'm an audience of this kind. You can't imagine such a thing, can you? Just take this great leap of imagination that I'm wrong. Thank you. You're not meant to laugh, and that I'm wrong, and instead of Leave winning, the result is exactly reversed. It's 48-52 in favour of Remain. Well, last time round, I had a jolly time on the BBC between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, probably only being watched by my mother at that time of night, but nonetheless, I was on with David Dimbleby and Hilary Benn. If we do the same thing again after a second referendum, it's gone the other way. What am I saying at 3 o'clock in the morning? I'm saying, well, now we shall have the best of 3. Why would anyone who voted leave the first time accept a reversal of the result? They would immediately ask for another referendum. And unless Remain got over 17.4 million votes, which is quite a high hurdle, people would immediately say, it doesn't count. It's not as good as the first vote anyway. So it would decide nothing, it would be deeply divisive, it would be undemocratic. That's why I'm opposed, just in case there is any doubt, to a second referendum. But there is no majority for it in the House of Commons. How do I know that? Well, the people in favour of it would not even put it down as a motion when the opportunity was there for them. They said, we're not doing this because they would lose. And that is true because no Leave MP wants a second referendum, and many Remain MPs see what a really bad idea it is. There's no majority for that. There is currently no majority for Theresa May's deal. I don't think the deal as it stands is a good deal. I think it is deeply flawed, and it sets out the terms of negotiation of our future relationship, which put us in a weak position. It would allow the EU to determine the terms of trade. That strikes me as a mistake, that in any negotiation, you want to put yourself in the best position, not hand it over to the other side. So I can go into more detail about why it's a bad deal, but it includes the European Court of Justice, it includes EU law remaining superior law, it puts a border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland whilst we are a single country, and it keeps us inside the customs union so we won't be able to do any trade negotiations. That, in a nutshell, is the reason for opposing it. And there's clearly no majority for it in the House of Commons. 230 votes defeat, the biggest defeat of any government motion ever in the history of the House of Commons. The only bigger defeats ever in Parliament were in the House of Lords, at the point at which the Lords were all Tories. A good thing too. No, sorry, I didn't say that. When the Lords were all Tories, and the Liberals, as they then were putting through the Liberal policies of the 1890s and early 1900s. Huge defeat. But Parliament is also not in favour of leaving without a deal, except that's what it voted for. You may say that's rather strange, because actually MPs voted through two laws, the Article 50 Act and the Withdrawal Act, both of which set a deadline for leaving with or without a deal. A lot of MPs either never read the Act they were passing, shocking thought that they should have read the Act carefully, I can't believe that's the case, or they've just got very poor memories and don't remember what they voted for. Could you think such a thing could be true? Or they're just political opportunities. Oh, no, of course they're not political opportunities. That would be most unfair to say that of my very distinguished colleagues. So this line that they won't accept leaving without any agreement, well, they ought to have thought of that beforehand. It is the default position, but opposition to it is strengthening in spite of how people voted earlier. So that's why I say this is very unclear as to what is going to happen. My guess, and it really is no more than a guess, is that on the 29th of March, one of three things will happen. The two equally most likely are that we leave without an agreement, or that we leave basically under Mrs May's withdrawal agreement, but with some tweaks that will be announced in the next week. I think they're the overwhelmingly most likely options. There is a very, very, very slim chance that there is a successful delay or stymieing of Brexit altogether, because delay is not really about delay, because they don't know what they want. Delay is about stopping Brexit and not delivering on the result. So those, I think, are the things that are likely to happen. And as I say, the two most likely, leaving without an agreement, or broadly Mrs May's deals tweaked, possibly tweaked to the more classic compromise. But what comes next? Why am I so excited about this? Because, as I said at the beginning, you ladies and gentlemen are the ones who are going to take this on. It's going to be you when you're leading the country, leading figures in business, in the law, in politics. You're going to be making this work for the nation and for your fellow citizens. The advantage of the wonderful education you are getting is that you will be in the position to do that. You will be in charge, which I hope is something you view with great excitement, because it is a serious responsibility that will pass to you in due course. Why is this exciting? Well, because I think that you will make better decisions about the future of our nation than could be made for you. I think you, when you put a platform forward to this country about how we should be governed, about what rules should be made, about how we trade with other nations, how we regulate business, how we set out our approach to the world, whether it's a social approach or whether it's an economic approach, your decisions will be better for the country, for you and for your families than can possibly be made by anybody else. And I recognise that in a democracy, I won't win every vote. But I will have the opportunity to put forward the arguments that I want and that I believe in the hope that in a government, the party I support could implement them. And those who are on the left will be able to do the same for what they believe in, thinking that those are the opportunities that might really improve the nation. Because although I tease the Lib Dems and though I'm by no means a socialist, I think the good intentions of almost everybody in politics are there. That people are not sitting in the Houses of Parliament thinking that they want to get up the next ladder to a promotion or whatever it is. Of course they don't mind that, but that's secondary to the feeling that they want to improve the condition of the British people, regardless of party, regardless of affiliation. But they'll be free to do it, you'll be free to do it, outside the European Union in a way that you're not free to do it inside. What I want to do, I believe in, I think it works, economic liberalism. I want to see an ability to cut our taxes, to reduce tariffs, to make it possible for goods, food, clothing, footwear in this country to be cheaper, helping those particularly the least well off, making their lives better, giving our companies an opportunity to compete more freely, removing onerous regulations that have made business harder to do. I think that will improve standards of living. I think it is a really exciting opportunity. I think the European Union is a desperately failed economic model. If you look at economic growth rates since the euro was created, the Eurozone has grown at a little more than half the rate of the UK and the US in the period since the euro was created. It is a failed economic model that is dragging us down with it. I think moving away from that is just extraordinarily exciting and an enormous opportunity. It is the real positive. And it's for us also to take our place back on the world scene. Now, I don't mean some sentimental imperialism, that's the last thing I want. What I mean is that if we can succeed, then we can lead by example. This is soft power, not hard power. This is saying this is the way to do it, and look what a success it's been. It's saying to Donald Trump, opening up markets leads to greater prosperity, not building walls and adding tariffs. Let's open up and be competitive. Thank you, one person agrees. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm half an hour in and I've got one person who's on my side. If I keep going long enough, I'll get all of you on my side. It is a phenomenally exciting opportunity, but basically it depends on a belief in ourselves. That's what I say to you. Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe in yourself? Do you believe that your vote, your decision-making power, your leadership will be better than that of Monsieur Juncker or his successor? Do you believe that what you think and what you offer to your fellow countrymen will be more attractive than what can be imposed upon you by a bureaucracy? Do you think that the nation-state of which you are a part, by its own democratic effort, can actually be a leader in inspiring other countries in the world to do things that are beneficial for their nations too? Or are you, in your heart of hearts, somebody who wants to manage decline? Somebody who looks around the world and says it's a frightening place, that China and India and Brazil are going to do well and the European area is going to decline. So let's just club together and put a wall around ourselves and pretend it's not happening. And let those nice people in Brussels take the difficult decisions, because it's much easier to stand on a political platform and say, oh, I didn't really want to do that, but I had to, I was made to by a bureaucrat. I just had to do it, in spite of what I said in my election manifesto. I had to do it, I'm so sorry. Is that the vision you have for how you will lead the country? I hope not, because I think the vision of your taking control with your fellow citizens is one that leads to the most terrific, fantastic opportunities, prosperity, but also social good for our nation. Thank you very much. You see the sunset monument being waved. It's very smart and apt. I'm very happy to take questions. And I will do my best. If you're sitting in that place there, I can't see you because of the light, so my apologies. You may have to stand up, but I'll come to this gentleman first, please.
So you mentioned in your speech about the importance of free speech in a free society. And I want to ask you about something, because the Labour MP here refuses to talk to me about it. So I'm going to do a redress of grievances with you, if that's all right. So, in 2003, Tony Blair passed a law that made it illegal to use grossly offensive speech online. And since then, we've got about 1,600 people a year being arrested and charged for saying grossly offensive things online. Now, I don't think offensive speech should be illegal. If what you say is considered offensive by those chaps out there, you shouldn't go to jail over it. You shouldn't be arrested. You shouldn't be fined. So, there was an uproar when a chap named Count Dankula was arrested for making a joke online. And we wrote to all the MPs we could find, and we got 23 MPs to back us that this law should be repealed because of what's happened. And in there I've got Caroline Nooks and Andrea Letson, so I'm sure you're right. But it's not just Dankula, it's not just a one-off case. We had a girl in Liverpool who was arrested and had a curfew placed on her because she quoted song lyrics. I mean, it's just a quote. And we also had a chap now in the case that, with people who disagree with the transgender movement, basically the phrase that women don't have penises. Those folks. Those folks are now being arrested because they have blogs, because they say things in the street that people don't like. Will you please repeal this law?
I feel as Mr. Gorbachev must have felt when Ronald Reagan went to the Berlin Wall and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. there was a vote in the House of Commons on freedom of speech in the Leveson report. And from memory, there were 530 MPs who voted to limit freedom of speech, and 13 who voted in favour of freedom of speech. Guess which side I was on? I was on the side of the 13. And I think in the House of Commons, sometimes the smaller the minority you are in, the more likely it is in the long term you are right. There are constraints on freedom of speech. The classic one is, I don't know whether I should tell you this under current circumstances, but in a crowded theatre, reasonably full theatre, shouting fire when there isn't one is sensibly illegal. Anyone disagree with that? No? That's sensible. If one of you were to say that you were going to hit somebody or you were going to kill them, that is quite rightly illegal. You should not be allowed to intimidate people. But if you were to say that Jacob Rees-Mogg has the most awful views and I wish he were not in Parliament, I would of course be desperately upset. But I would not wish you to be stopped from saying it. I think the whole point of freedom of speech is that people have to be able to say things that I do not like. Let's take something more serious. I don't imagine all of you are practicing members of the Catholic Church. But if you want to say something deeply shocking, like you don't think the Pope is infallible, I think you're entitled to say that, and I cannot say, oh no, that offends my religion and therefore you must not say it. Actually, a lot of Catholics take that view as it happens, but you get my point. If you were to say something offensive about Catholicism, you are entitled to say it. There are, however, some limits, and there are some bad cases. I'm afraid I don't want to go to the stake for really silly people who get their dogs to make Hitler salutes. I just think that's stupid. I don't think he should be prosecuted, but I think he's a bit of an idiot. Is that fair? And that we should make our stance on things that really matter, not on people who are just a bit silly and probably publicity seeking, and do things that are gratuitously and foolishly offensive. Freedom of speech is best protected on the high ground, not in the marshes. But it is of fundamental importance, and offence is not enough, because we could all be offended by something. Having said that, I'm delighted there are people who feel so moved about politics that they wish to spend their Friday afternoon campaigning against what I believe in. That's part of democracy, that's good, and should be encouraged, and I hope that when Jeremy Corbyn comes to speak here, you'll be outside with posters. politely but firmly saying, you don't want to turn Kent into Venezuela. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm a Liberal Democrat, so I feel offended anyway.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
If Theresa May was to leave office after Brexit, which is heavily speculated, who would you vote for Tory leader, or would you put yourself down?
There are other meanings of the phrase put down, and maybe not to be put down. Well, why didn't I ask the audience? Because it's always interesting to find out who would be popular. I won't put my own name forward. I haven't been a minister, I'm just a backbench MP. I think I'm not the right person to put my name forward. But I'd be very interested to know who this audience would want, because, as I understand it, you're not all card-carrying Conservatives, and therefore it's to try and find out who has appeal. So let me start with the most obvious candidate, which must be Boris Johnson. Who here thinks Boris is a good idea? A smattering. Who here thinks David Davis is a good idea? Okay. Who here would like Anna Rudd?
Anyone but Corbyn?
I'm not going to offer Jeremy Corbyn. I know times, the Jeremy Corbyn is not getting your own consent. Not yet. Okay, Susanna Aberbrand, Sajid Javid. Okay, Sajid does quite well. Jeremy Hunt. Okay. Dominic Raab, yes, very good shout out from the back. Dominic Raab. Well, my estimate is that Boris is probably just about first, that Sajid is just about second, and Dominic's just about third, but it was pretty close.
Who wants more Bentham?
No, I'm not offering myself, I'm cheating. And that's very interesting, because I think there's no clear overall winner, but there are some names in the frame that people would want. I will now answer the question. If it were tomorrow, I would back Boris. Why would I do that? I think he has the greatest reach and understanding, the greatest charisma, and that he led the Brexit campaign. And I think you need somebody who believed in Brexit to deliver the final stage of Brexit, and indeed to be held responsible for it. A lot of Remainers have said, we want to hold the Brexiteers responsible. I'd love us to be held responsible, because I think we'd do it well. Of course I do, because we believe in it. Thank you for your question. Who next? I've got the front row, please.
You touched on the independent group of MPs that have ditched both the Labour and the Conservative Party. So kind of two questions from, or kind of three from that.
If I were John Bercow, I would not allow that, but I'm not.
Have you talking to Conservative colleagues that have left? So, for instance, Hyde Allen, who's my neighbouring MP. Also, do you think they'll be electorally successful in the next election and kind of grasping kind of the centre ground? And is it kind of necessary at this moment of time in light of Brexit and other issues?
Well, do tune in to LBC between 6 and 7 this evening, because my topic this evening is going to be the people who have left, just to give an advert for my own programme. I've just said hello to one of the three. I haven't seen all of them, I just haven't happened to bump into them. But I always think it's a mistake to take political disagreement personally. I've never done that, and I'm very friendly with Labour MPs. I'm remarkably friendly with quite a lot of Scottish Nationalist MPs, who I like enormously, which I probably shouldn't. And it's fine for me to admit, I think they try and keep it quiet for obvious reasons. And there are even a few Lib Dem MPs who I like and get on with. I think politics should always be in that sense civilised, and so I hold nothing personal against them. I think they're making exactly the same mistakes as the SDP. What they ought to do is they ought, all of them, to go for by-elections on Monday. And they would do, if they did it now, they'd do really well. But every day they delay saying that's what they're going to do, people think it's not new politics, it's politics as usual. There are people who aren't going to risk their livelihood to do what they think is right. They're just going to say, well, you voted for us, and we'll carry on. And I think that disappoints people who would like to support them. So if they were bold, if they said, okay, on the 4th of May, whatever the first Thursday of May is, we are all going to stand in by-elections, I think they'd do really well. I'm glad they're not doing this, because it would give them a huge boost and fillip, and would really set their path going, and would get other people to join them. It would be quite a, to use a word that's got hijacked in politics, momentum for them. But the fact that they're not doing that, I think makes it very hard for them to have any deep impact. And they are leaving their parties, as far as I can tell, because of an issue that is being settled rather than one that is new. You know, Brexit was voted for in 2016. We have probably left the European Union on the 29th of March. Setting up an anti-Brexit party just as Brexit is settled leaves a bit of a gap in your policy offering. What they'd say on the 30th of March, they say we want to go back in. Therefore, unless they were to be bold, I think they won't do enormously well. But sometimes things aren't the same as they were last time. Is there anyone over in... Yes, please.
I was just wondering what your views are on referendums in general. I mean, obviously this one has happened, and I'm not really a fan of doing it again, but we live in parliamentary, supposedly a parliamentary democracy, and parliamentarians are meant to make hard choices. Do you think referendums are a good idea?
Well, do you want the Rees-Mogg theory on referendums? Because I do have one, and not this bit in my pocket, but it's something I've thought about a great deal. What is the role in referendums in a parliamentary democracy? And I think the role for referendums is in something that is constitutionally fundamental. So, Parliament has the right to legislate for 5-year periods, and then it has to go back to the voters and give them all their powers back intact for them to decide who is going to do that for the next 5 years. And there's a clear principle that Parliament can't bind its successors. But some things do effectively bind successors, even if nominally they don't. And these are the big constitutional decisions that affect how people exercise their vote and fundamentally how they're governed. So what do I mean? I think any change to the voting system ought to have a referendum, because that is changing the basis, the contract between the voter and the elected. I think any reform to the House of Lords ought to have a referendum, because again, that's a fundamental change to how people are governed, how the Constitution works. If you were to change the length of a parliament from 5 years back to 7 years, that ought, I don't think anyone's going to, but that ought to have a referendum. And I think the European Union is in that category because it is fundamental to how we're governed. I happen to think that Tony Blair's reforms to the judiciary, the abolition of the House of Lords Judicial Committee and the establishment of the Supreme Court, was such a change to how we're governed that it ought to have had a referendum. So it's those big decisions that last well beyond a parliament that I think should be subject to a referendum. Somebody right at the back, please.
You talked about the importance of the first Brexit vote and how important it is to respect that. The statistic for Scotland to leave is 62%. No, is to remain for 62% and to leave for 38%. Is there any reason for Scotland to stay in the United Kingdom when it seems that the parliamentary policy is not interested in respecting the entire country's wishes to remain in the European Union?
You've got a supporter down here. It's a really important question, and it's fundamental to our constitution. We are a United Kingdom, and Scotland voted to be in the United Kingdom in its own referendum. And a consequence of that was that its membership of the European Union is as part of the United Kingdom. So its wish to be in the United Kingdom is respected. Very interestingly, at the last general election, Nicola Sturgeon campaigned on having a second referendum because she said the Brexit referendum had changed everything. And this was very bad for the SNP. They lost a lot of seats and a lot of votes. Scotland rejected the idea of having another bite at the cherry. So although your statistics are absolutely accurate, it seems that Scotland has decided to live with both results, and there is as yet no polling evidence that it wants to reverse them. Is Scotland at some point in the future entitled to another referendum on whether or not it remains part of the United Kingdom? In my view, yes, of course it is. But it is, as Alex Salmond said at the time, a decision for another generation, not for the generation of the fruit fly. It's for a generation of human beings, and that's talking about 25 to 30 years, I would have thought. But it is fair, ultimately. The one thing that would have changed my vote from leave to remain is if I had thought that leaving would have fundamentally upset the balance of the United Kingdom. I think the United Kingdom is more important to me than the European Union. And I came to the conclusion that actually leaving would strengthen the United Kingdom because it makes it more necessary. Yes, please. Northern Ireland is in the same position, that it has the right to have a poll on whether or not it stays in the United Kingdom or joins Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. There isn't the evidence that it wants to do that, and there needs to be evidence before that poll can be triggered. Again, I think being outside the European Union, being the United Kingdom, is helpful, because it doesn't have two layers of bureaucracy on top, it just has one. And very interestingly, I'm on the Brexit Select Committee, and Bertie Ahern came before us last week, and he was asked about this border poll, and he was very strongly against it. So people who historically have been in favour of a single Irish state don't think this is the right time because of Brexit for an Irish poll. So I think the situation is similar to Scotland. Well, I think it will be as it happens. I think that Northern Ireland will see more directly the benefits of the United Kingdom because it won't be intermediated by Brussels. So extra government money that goes to Northern Ireland primarily goes through Brussels and looks to be EU money. But of course it isn't, it's our money going through the EU. And I think as that is clearer, that will actually be beneficial and will bind us more together. Yes, please.
So, in light of an answer you gave at Question Time today, in relation to Shimon McBegan, why do you think that allowing someone in that's actively going to join the terror organisation is a good idea? And if you do believe that, which I'm not sure you did, when do you draw the line for others coming back?
Well, I think the issue here, there are a number of issues here actually. First of all, I believe fundamentally in the equality of British citizens. Nobody can take my passport away, whatever I do. Whatever I do, my passport cannot be taken away. I think that's right. You see, I'm very proud of this country, in case you haven't worked it out. But I believe that everyone who holds that passport is part of something that is special, exciting, and the best in the world. And I don't care whether you took that oath yesterday, or like me, your family has lived quietly in Somerset for hundreds of years. There is an equality of Britishness amongst us all, regardless of how we got that passport or where our parents came from. If you can take away one British citizen's passport, you need to be able to take it away from everybody. But you can't, because you're not allowed under international law to make people stateless. So that's my first point, it's one of principle. There's a second point. To put it at its simplest, you don't tip your rubbish into your neighbour's garden. If British citizens have gone around the world and committed crimes, really serious crimes, allegedly, though we don't know the details, whose responsibility is that? Is it ours or is it the Bangladeshis? And where does Bangladesh really come into this? That this lady's never had any connection to Bangladesh other than her parents were born there. She's never lived there, she's never had a Bangladeshi passport. And I think there's something, look, we're the 5th biggest economy in the world, and we're expecting the 100th or 120th economy in the world to take charge of a really difficult, potentially terrorist problem. With whom does the responsibility lie? Where is our duty? Is our duty to dump a problem on Bangladesh? Or is it to say, well, this lady, this young woman, has a British passport, it's our responsibility to deal with it. And the third thing, if she has committed crimes under British law, when she comes back she must be prosecuted. And the law must be done. But like all of us, she is innocent until proved guilty. This is a fundamental principle of great antiquity in British law, and it protects all of us from the arbitrary rule of the state. I'm very uncomfortable with the state having the arbitrary power to punish people without due process. I'm not always convinced the Prime Minister is my greatest admirer. I think she's got some reason not to be. But it would be a bit much if because of that she could take away my passport. And I accept that these are not similar circumstances, but arbitrary rule is always dangerous because you never know where it will end up. So that's the case for, in principle, us taking responsibility, recognising the equality of British citizens and upholding the rule of law. But I can say one more thing. And this is, I think, where many people disagree with me and think I should go and join the Liberal Democrats. I think that a girl of 15 who is married whilst she is still 15 is at least to some extent a victim of abuse. And I think in any other circumstances, if she had been abducted in Rochester and sold off to dodgy men at 15, even if she had broken the law in that period, or broken the law when she was 16, if she were an illegal immigrant brought into this country in the sex trade, we would be saying she was a victim, not that she was a terrorist. And therefore we must temper justice with mercy. That yes, if she's committed crimes, she should be prosecuted. But we have to remember the context of it. And a very good follow-up question was asked at question time, which I didn't have the opportunity to answer, because as you know, it doesn't always come back to you. Somebody said, had it been a 15-year-old boy, would I say the same thing? And I think the answer is yes. That the age of maturity under British law is 18, not a criminal responsibility, but of maturity. And somebody who is led into some great wrongdoing under the age of 18 is treated in our law differently from somebody who is over the age of 18. And I think that is right and important. And so yes, you may think I should grow a beard and start wearing sandals, but I think we must temper justice with mercy. I've got two gentlemen with beards. I wasn't making any personal comment. You first, and then I'll come to you.
So in the letter that the three MPs wrote to the Prime Minister this week, stating their reasons for leaving the party, they said they feel they can no longer remain in a party of government whose policies and priorities are so firmly in the grip of the ERG. How do you respond to that?
If only it were true. If the ERG had this grip on policy, we wouldn't have the dreadful withdrawal agreement that we've got. I think the facts speak otherwise. And what is the ERG standing up for? We are standing up for what was in the Conservative Party manifesto. We are standing up for leaving the customs union, leaving the single market, and leaving the jurisdiction of the European Court. All of these were in the manifesto, which all three of them also stood on. They didn't decide to disassociate themselves from the party then. They knew what Theresa May's policy was. So this is not some wild, extreme, woolly behaviour. This is mainstream conservatism. And I know we've all been accused of being head-banging right-wingers. Well, how many head-banging right-wingers have given the answer that I just gave to you on the question about Ms. Begum? I'm not sure we are as head-bangingly right-wing as we sometimes get accused of being, and that just because you're in favour of Brexit doesn't mean you are a right-winger. Let's speak quietly, but Jeremy Corbyn's in favour of Brexit, and he's
I was hoping someone else was going to mention this, and the price point that they did it, but you've repeatedly said that if we do leave without a deal, there's nothing to be fearful about if we leave on WTO terms. Now, I think, with all due respect, it's quite telling that you haven't mentioned any equality. The National Foreigners Union has warned that a no-deal Brexit will stop British exports for 6 months. Major food retailers, including Sainsbury's and Asda, have warned that prices will go up and shelves will be empty. The very Secretary of State for Health and Social Care said that the government would prioritize medicine over food. And here, closer to home, in Kent, the NHS blood donation said that appointments in Dover and Folkestone 2 weeks before the vote, 6 weeks after the vote, would be cancelled because of the traffic jam that would ensue in Kent, which would prevent donation teams from getting to hospital and providing them with blood that they need. Don't you feel that these are facts that should be mentioned when we're talking about some possible effects? Because, as you said, we don't know what's going to happen, but none of these have been mentioned by you. Don't you think this is something that we need to include in our discussion about Brexit? Because it is real people getting affected, their lives, their jobs, their lives.
Well, I'm glad you haven't. You're absolutely right to mention these points. In my defence, I felt my speech couldn't go on forever, so you can't cover every possible eventuality. But on the points you mentioned, the National Farmers Union says that it won't be able to export anything for 6 months. Actually, if we leave without a deal, under WTO rules, as I understand it, for 6 months, you are able to use your own money to pay the tariffs when there is a sudden change in tariff. So that can be taken care of for 6 months by the British government, which would allow time to settle what the permanent relationship was. The stories about not having food on the shelves are simply nonsense. That requires the British government to stop imports coming through, and the British government has said that it won't. Why would we? Why would we suddenly say we're not allowing French food in that was safe on the 29th of March? It would be just as safe on the 30th of March. And once we've left, who decides? We do. So what government is going to prevent voters buying food? No government that ever wants to be re-elected. So that is a non-problem. It is a fanciful problem. But it's made even more fanciful. And the Red Cross in Kent is just being silly, because we have heard from everybody involved, Port of Dover, Eurotunnel, Port of Calais, that they are going to ensure that flow is prioritised over compliance, and that therefore goods will continue coming in. The president of the Port of Calais went on Radio 4 as a day programme, and he said it was offensive that the British were spending so much money in Kent getting ready for no deal, because the Port of Calais was not going to do its checks at any greater length after we left than it does now. And the only thing that leads to these problems is if the Port of Calais completely gums up for a period longer than it did when there was a strike a few years ago, and we had 20 days of queues and of the M20 being shut. It would have to be longer than that before there was any effect, because that was coped with without the shelves running clean of food. And the Port of Calais says it's not going to do that. So you've got Port of Calais saying that, you've got Dover saying it, you've got HMRC doing it, saying it. Where are these problems coming from? They are, dare I say, fake news. They're rather wonderfully. I went to the National Archive 18 months ago or so, and they showed me an edict issued by the Privy Council in 1689, and it was an edict against false news. So false news is clearly a problem of greater longevity than even Donald Trump's campaign. Do you want to come back? It looks as if you do.
You said that Patrick Minford, who you've described as the greatest economic forecaster that this country has, he has said on record, and James O'Brien did mention this on LBC, he said that for Brexit to succeed, Patrick Minford speaking, for Brexit to succeed, agriculture and industry have to be decimated. How is
more competitive economy, things inevitably change. Of course they do. But that agriculture, this country's agriculture, is some of the most efficient in the world. And the question is, how do you make all our agriculture equally efficient? And the answer is by GM crops. It's by automation. It's not by massive regulation. When I speak to farmers in North East Somerset, what they say to me is if you use the word subsidy, they get very upset. They say this is not a subsidy. This is a payment for us to be less efficient farmers than we would otherwise be. And once they become less efficient, then they need protection, which puts up prices in the shops, and they need subsidies. I'm in favour of allowing them to be the best farmers they can be, and then competing. And I'm in favour of staging it. I actually spoke to the New Zealand High Commissioner recently, because New Zealand did this very, very harshly, and it led to real problems in the agricultural industry because it did it overnight. We should not do it overnight. We should do it in a staged way to give people the chance to become more competitive. And it's really interesting in terms of manufacturing what's been going on with the car industry, because the car industry is having problems that are absolutely nothing to do with Brexit. They are to do with governments cheating on diesel, telling us all to buy diesel cars and then banning them effectively. And they are to do with other regulatory effects that have come in by the increased demand for electric cars, a fundamental change in the structure of the car industry. And in this country, an increase in taxation on cars as well, and particularly new cars, that has had a profound effect in decline in demand for cars in the UK, bigger in Germany, bigger in France, and bigger in Italy. It's not a Brexit effect. Who would like to come on next? Yes, please.
Is Donald Trump making America great again?
I'm not sure America ever stopped being great, actually. I think America is the most remarkable country. I love visiting America because it is so remarkably successful, and it's by and large so positive. It thinks it can get things done, and they have a huge confidence about themselves. So I don't think America ever stopped being great, though I could do a critique of recent American presidents, not all of whom have been heroes of mine. Yes, please.
So just ask two questions. So a lot of the things that you've answered and talked about in general are more long-term changes, which I can agree with. But if you focus on the short term, firstly, as a representative for Somerset constituents, the CAP being removed with, there's estimations of a change from 3 billion to 1 billion pounds in subsidies. So I understand long term that changes are needed for efficiency, but in the short term, how do you get through that without harming your own constituents too much? And secondly, in a similar way, short-term effects like, say, a no-deal outcome, what are your views on short-term technical recession, both in the UK and also contrasting with Europe, given the current economic climate?
On the first question, I'm not in favour of removing the CAP and putting nothing in its place immediately. I think what has to be done is phased change, and that in the short term the amount of money spent will remain the same. Don't see that being a saving that can be made immediately that we've left. So I hope that's reassuring to people who have farming interests, or think farming interests important. On the economic bit, I think you really get to the nub of the matter when you say, considering what's happening in Europe at the moment, that Italy, France and Germany basically had no growth in the last quarter of last year, or were in recession. And that is a problem because of the failings of the European economic model. And there is, of course, a risk that a global downturn that is taking place, and you see that a monetary tightening in the US is about to be reversed, that China is having its difficulties. A global downturn will have an effect on the UK, and is likely to be blamed on Brexit, whether correctly or not. So I think there are difficult economic headwinds at the moment that actually have nothing to do with Brexit. I think the opportunity for us, if we leave without a deal, is the £39 billion we save, which we can use, and we should use, to stimulate the economy. The dramatic improvement in the deficit figures, with the largest surplus, I think, ever in January on the public finances. So the deficit for this year is going to be significantly lower than the Chancellor forecast at the budget. So there's some room for manoeuvre. But also we should do those things that help consumers immediately without harming producers. In the end, protection harms producers, but if you change things too quickly, it can harm them. Removing it can harm them in the short term. In the long term, it simply makes producers more efficient. But in the short term, you can remove all the tariffs and non-tariff barriers on things that we do not produce. And if you do that, you give a boost to consumption with no cost to production, because a lot of our tariffs and non-tariff barriers are about protecting inefficient continental European industries, which actually we have no interest in protecting. That's a matter for them. Yes, please.
The Prime Minister recently this week was accused of almost dumbing down the demands of the Brexiteers. So recently she's been accused of almost sort of sidelining and ignoring Sir Graham Brady's amendment, which called for the backstop to be replaced, and she went back to Northern Ireland and said there should be changes to it. So are people like you and Nicky Morgan really wasting your time with the Malthouse Compromise?
Time will tell. I think there was one good thing about it, even if the Malthouse Compromise comes to nothing, and that's it showed that the different wings of the Conservative Party can work together. And one of the things that is important about politics is personal connection. I was actually at university with Nicky Morgan, and we've always been on the other side on the European debate as long as we've known each other. But actually, if you've known somebody for 30 years, You know that when you sit down in a room and say, do you think this can work? And do you think that our sides of the argument will live with it? And if you get that agreement, you know that you're both doing it in good faith and decently. And particularly as people have started leaving the party, to show that the Conservative Party is still a broad church, we are still united to a sufficient degree, is important in itself, that we can still work together. And once we're over Brexit, and this is more for the Conservatives in the room than the general audience, because it won't be of interest to you particularly, but once we're over Brexit, there is more that unites the Conservative Party than that divides it. So it has a benefit, even if your analysis, your harsh analysis, is correct. And I'd be very bad at going